Hey everybody, it's Rod with the Photo Fair coming back at you with another video. Hey, today I'm going to talk a little bit about astro-imaging. This is something that's becoming really popular. The learning curve is steep, but it starts out pretty easy and pretty simple. You can get some really cool images without a whole lot of experience. So let's get right into it. So first thing I want to do today, let's address the Band-Aid. Yeah, whack my head on a shelf like an idiot. So that's what that's doing. I figured you'd rather look at a Band-Aid than some, gouging my head. Prognosis is good. I'm probably going to live. About the astrophotography, I've kind of gotten back into it. And I want to do a shout out to Nico at Nebula Photos. Nico has put together some very comprehensive videos where, he has lots of videos, but he's done several where he goes out and hits what I would consider easy targets, the Andromeda Galaxy, M31, and the Orion Nebula, M42, both of those messier objects. These are fairly bright objects. If you go out to a dark sky location, you can see them with the naked eye. So it's really easy to aim your camera at them, without any fancy astronomy equipment. If you're doing them from skies in town, and I'm going to show some images where I did them right in my backyard here in suburban Vancouver. If you're doing them from in town, you might need to, download an app on your phone that helps you find objects in the sky and point your camera in the right direction. But he literally went out with a tripod, a regular tripod that you probably already own, a 200mm f2.8 Canon L series lens, and a Rebel camera. Can't remember which one it was, doesn't matter. Rebels are lightweight and inexpensive cameras. There's a very good chance you may already have a better camera than that. And he went out there, and I think he made a whole bunch of exposures of 1 or 2 seconds each. And he took like hundreds of pictures, right? He had no tracking device, nothing. And he then goes through and shows you how to use it. In that particular video, I think he used free software called Deepsky Tracker, available for PC. Deepsky Tracker is not available for Mac, but there are options for Mac. I'm a Mac user. And he goes through it. It shows you how to do what's called stretching to bring the details out. Excellent videos. Nico, Nebula Photos. He was very helpful to me because I wasn't very good at stretching. I watched some of his tutorials and I've gotten better. Now, I happen to own a 135 f2 L series Canon lens. This is ideal for getting astronomy photos of things like the Orion Nebula and the Andromeda Galaxy. Those are large objects in the sky, guys. A lot of people don't realize how physically big they are. If you go out to a super dark location where you're hundreds and hundreds of miles away from any city, there's not a lot of those left in our country, but there are some. You look up at the sky, and Andromeda, it covers a full 3 degrees of the sky. Now, what does that mean? The moon, a full moon, is 1/2 of 1 degree. So imagine that, an object that is the size of 6 full moons in a row. It's huge. Now, it's not as bright as the moon, but when you go to a dark sky location, you look up and it's like, oh my God, look at that thing. So I'm going to show you 2 images that I've worked on. One of them, very basic. As a matter of fact, we'll start with that one because it was super basic. I went out on a regular tripod, sort of emulating what Nico did, but I didn't spend as much time out there. I only did, I believe, this is a 135 lens. I was able to drag the shutter a little bit longer. You got to remember that the stars appear to move across the sky because the Earth is rotating. And so if you take too long of an exposure, the stars will form little star trails. And, we don't want that unless you're looking for that effect, but you certainly don't want to do that to do a nebula or a galaxy. So we want pinpoint stars. And so for that particular object, the 2 seconds, I believe, was the exposure, and I did 100 of those, so I had 200 seconds of exposure. It's only 3.5 minutes. That's it. Now, there's guys who go out and they put hours into these deep sky objects where they literally take exposures that add up to hours. So the software, Deepsky Stacker, Cyril for the Mac is very good, and is free, I believe. I think you can pay them and you get some extra features, but I believe they have a free version. And there's lots of other ones out there, Pixel and Sight. You can also do quite a bit. You'd be surprised what you can do with Photoshop. So what these stacking softwares do, brilliant. What they do is they take all of these exposures that you take and they merge them into one image. So you get the data as if you had held the shutter open for an hour or for 3 minutes or for however many exposures you did. So take a look at this. This was, 200 seconds, guys. That's 3.5 minutes. That's nothing. I went up and processed it and I got a decent image. It's kind of cool. But look what happens when I add a lot more exposure time. This lens, once again, this time I used my Metabones 0.71x focal reducer, which made this a 95 millimeter f1.4. So now I was getting a little more light on the sensor. And I have 42 minutes of exposure, cumulative exposure time. Look at the difference. Wow. But only 42 minutes. Now there's guys again out there doing hours and hours, and you get even more detail. The more exposure you put on that, into those stacked images, the more detail you get. Now the beauty is if you're willing to schlep your camera out to a dark sky location, then you could, if I did 42 minutes out in the desert under the darkest of dark skies, there would have been 2 or 3 times more detail than you see here with this photo in the same 42 minutes. Because you got to overcome the light pollution, which is kind of diluting the light. And so it's simple equipment, guys. You can get into astrophotography, and it's simple equipment. You don't have to go out and buy a fancy telescope. You don't have to spend a bunch of money. So for the 42-minute exposure that you see, I did have that mounted on my Sky Tracker mount. And a Sky Tracker mount is a mount that actually follows the sky and tracks for you. And that is not an expensive mount. I think I paid $300 for it. It might have been less than $300. But that way I didn't have to keep readjusting the camera as Andromeda moved over the 42 minutes. Both of these are cropped. They're somewhat cropped. I probably cropped away, 2/3 of the image to tighten it up like that. And but it's a 32 megapixel sensor on my M6 Mark II, which is what I used for this. And so even cropping it in, this is still an 8 megapixel image, and you can make nice prints from an 8 megapixel image. You'd be surprised. But anyhow, so gonna just go real briefly because I don't want to extend this as kind of just a basic introduction type video, but I just feel like a lot of people don't realize that you can make beautiful deep sky astro images with basic equipment you probably already own. Fast glass is ideal. You're going to shoot it wide open because it's all about getting as many photons on there as possible. You don't have to worry about edge sharpness because you're almost certainly going to crop it in a little bit anyway. So shoot your lens, whatever it is. If you don't have an f2, maybe you've got a 135 2.8. That's okay. You'll have to do twice as much exposure to get the same level of detail, but that's okay. You could do it. To get this, you would need 84 minutes of total exposure. And again, there's a couple of simple rules. If you want to just go out and try it tonight, if you got clear skies, and you want to make sure you have nice clear skies, no clouds fluttering around or anything like that. But what you do is you can start with the basic, what they call the 500 rule. So the 500 rule simply says you take 500, divide it by the focal length of your lens, and that's your maximum exposure time without having any star trails. Now, that's a very imperfect formula. But it is a good basic starting point. And so, for example, if I'm shooting with a 100 millimeter lens, okay, doesn't matter what the f-stop is, a 100 millimeter lens, if I divide 500 by 100, I get 5 seconds. So I could hold the shutter open for 5 seconds and most likely I won't have any star trails or elongated stars. Now, the reason that's a suspect rule, and it's a very general rule of thumb, is it's kind of like the old hand holding a lens for vibration rule. That's just a basic rule. Sometimes there's other factors that can affect that. So, if you want to play it safe, take that, whatever that number is, and cut it in half. But if you all know where the North Star is, Polaris, the North Star, if you can find the North Star, anything close to the North Star, you're going to be able to drag the shutter a little bit longer. As you get further and further away from the North Star, you're going to have to speed that shutter up a little bit. And it's all based because all the objects circle around Polaris in the night sky. The further out you get, the more distance, the more there's going to be movement out there on the edge. So if you're doing, say, M81, M82, those are very close to Polaris. You can drag the shutter longer than the 500 rule. If you are out on the periphery, way away from Polaris, then you might have to cut that in half. Or maybe even, divided by 3. So it's a basic rule. Now, the 500 rule is based on 35 millimeter full frame. So you want to use the equivalent focal length. So if you're using an APS-C Canon, that's 1.6. So that 100 millimeter lens is going to be 160. I would start with Andromeda. Andromeda is in good position for astro imaging from late July, early August, all the way through the new year and into January, maybe even February. And it's in the northeast sky, which is ideal for me because I live in northeast Vancouver. I'm on the edge of the metro area. And when I'm looking to the northeast, I am looking out into the countryside. There's no light dome in the northeast. So that's ideal for me. Whereas if I were looking to the southwest, I've got the glare of Vancouver and Portland. Vancouver and Portland's population combined is well over 1 million people. And, there's 3 million people in the metro area. That's a big light dome. So I don't want to be shooting to the southwest. I don't want to shoot west. I don't want to shoot south or any of that 180-degree sphere in that direction. I want to shoot north, northeast, or east, really, ideally. And Andromeda, that's where it sets. So it's fantastic. Andromeda also, right now, is way up high in the sky. We're now early November. Andromeda's up pretty high in the sky. When you shoot objects that are nearly directly overhead or up high in the sky, you have less atmosphere to shoot through, and so you're going to get a little bit better images. That's a little more ideal, having that camera up at a high angle off the horizon. Shooting right on the horizon is less desirable. And then Orion, which is going to start being visible here in normal hours, coming up here pretty quick. Orion's a good winter and spring constellation, and the Orion Nebula is pretty spectacular. So I've been doing Andromeda here lately because it's been in ideal shooting position. Orion is, for me, east-southeast, a little bit less desirable, but still shooting away from the massive light dome of Vancouver and Portland, so it works out pretty well for me. Where you live, obviously, could be different depending on your location. Other objects might make more sense. But so Deep Sky Tracker, if you're on a PC, is free software, pretty easy to use. Another thing you can do that's real easy is do a wide, if you can go to I would do this at a dark sky location. I did this one in my backyard, this kind of wide. This was a 35 f1.4 of just the northeast sky. You've got Andromeda. You can see Andromeda is kind of small in the picture there. And then you see that little red nebula over there. That's called the Pac-Man Nebula. And so both of those showed up, and I think I had 20 minutes total exposure time on this. But this would have been way better out at a dark sky location. You would have seen the Milky Way, the clouds of the Milky Way and all that in there if I'd have been at a dark sky location. But those were even easier. And, again, don't need a tracking mount. Because you can drag the shutter 35 1.4, that part of the sky, you can drag that shutter 8, 7, 8 seconds, most likely, and not see star trails. This was cropped in just a little bit. I didn't crop a whole lot on this one. It's a pretty wide swath of the sky, and it can be a lot of fun. Okay, this is that basic, simple, easy Andromeda shot. All I did was I took 4 different sets of photos. The first are called lights. Those are the actual images of the galaxy. I took 50 images at 4 seconds each with my EOS M6 Mark II, that's a 1.6 crop camera, and the 135 f2. So there were 50 of those. I then took what we call darks. Darks are simply put the lens cap on and then take, in this case I did about 20%, so I did 10 images, darks. So the shutter goes off, 4 seconds each, but with the lens cap on, total darkness. That's to help the software determine how much ambient noise you have. Then I did what we call biases. This is where and I did these inside the house. I took 10 of those, and that's just at a really fast shutter speed, lens cap on, and it's a reference, for noise. Okay, and then the last thing I did was I put stretched a t-shirt, a cotton white t-shirt over the front of the lens, pointed the lens at a large flat light, and ripped off 10 images there as well. That helps the software with vignetting. So that's it. You plug all of those into Deep Sky Tracker, and Deep Sky Tracker stacks them all together. It eliminates a lot of the digital noise. Now, I shot this at 800 ISO, and there's not a lot of digital noise there, and it worked out really great. Okay, so depending on how fast your computer is, it could take a few minutes to as long as an hour to process all these images. Really depends on the speed of your computer. But in the end, you're going to get a TIFF file. Photoshop can read TIFF files, no problem. These are uncompressed, and they're going to be pretty big depending on the size of your camera. Mine was, I think, 54 megabyte file size of that TIFF. You then can load that TIFF into Photoshop, which is what I use to stretch this image. Nothing fancy, just Photoshop. The stretching is a fairly simple process, but you got to play with it a little bit. And here's basically what you do. Okay, so you start out with a really dark image here. This is a 32-bit image that it puts out. And the first thing you want to do in Photoshop is come up here to, let's see, edit, or image rather, mode, and then you change it to 16 bits. Now it'll ask you some, do you want to make these adjustments or not? I'm simply going to hit OK and forget about my big brush there. And now we have a 16-bit image. So now we're going to use the levels command, okay? And that's Control or Command L, depending on whether you're on Mac or PC. And you've got this block of data here. And then we've got all this emptiness here. We want to get rid of that. So we take this middle slider and we move it towards the block of data, say right about there. And we hit OK. And then we do it again. So now we're here. Now we're going to bring this side up a little bit there. All right, and we're going to go like that and hit OK. We're going to do it again. Now we're going to bring this slider back over here. Okay, and then we hit OK. And then we basically keep going through this. This is called stretching. I'm doing this in the most basic way here. I really recommend you watch Nico's videos because he goes into some extra details. But as you can see, we're starting to do what we call stretching the image. You're starting to see more detail come in to the image. And that is the process that you do kind of over and over again to bring out the details slowly but surely. There's also the curves, which is Control or Command M, where you can kind of play with the curve a little bit to try and bring out the various details. It took a long while to take it from this to what you saw on the screen. You'll also notice that in this image, Andromeda is kind of vertical. I rotated the image after I was done to get it to look more level like that. So that's really all I want to go over on this kind of an introductory video. I'm going to put some links down below to Nico's videos, link to that astronomy calculator if you want to do that, or just start out using that 500 rule. So anyway, any questions, comments, leave them right down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Photo Fair, and you'll get hit that notification button, and when we do a new video, you will be informed. Don't forget, November 18th at Newark Pavilion in Newark, California is the Fall Photo Fair show. I'm excited. We've got special guest speaker Kim Komanique. He is a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist, and he's going to be giving a great presentation at 11 in the morning on the stage at Newark. So photofair.com for more information on that. Thank you.